Listen, I'm going to warn you, some of you who are hanging out and came in for service in normal time and you were crammed outside because we were still in here talking. I just got fired up and like it just, sorry about that. You'll be okay. But like those poor people, they were like captive and it was crazy. We've been talking about this for 3 weeks and like just building up this I found stuff, man. I'm telling you, this stuff is messing with me. I love this story. Now listen, we were talking about this. You're familiar with this story, at least because you saw the video. But if not, you might be familiar with a phrase called the prodigal son. You might be familiar with the story behind that phrase and the idea of what God's love is like for us and stuff. But now listen, we're talking about that today, but we've been really talking about it for 3 weeks because Jesus tells this story it kind of to the Pharisees. And what I love about how he talks to the Pharisees during this is really powerful because there's this tendency for us to misunderstand this and read it like it's all about us, and it really is, but you got to get the tension. And I love when Jesus talks to the Pharisees because Jesus likes to talk to the Pharisees, and sometimes he kind of gives them like, kind of little subtle things. And sometimes he's like straight up in their face about their self-righteousness. And then other times it's like this, where it's subtle and it gets bigger and bigger. And by the end of it, it's like all up in their face. Because the stories that play out here are intended to kind of get at the Pharisees and their story and their kind of interactions. And what happens here is just unbelievable because he starts telling this story to the Pharisees in like this beginning part. He starts talking about the lost sheep. Now you might have heard that story. What good shepherd doesn't leave the 99 and go find the one, to pursue him. We love to think about it because we're the one and he pursues us and we love that part of it. But what we forget sometimes is the Pharisees are the 99. They're like, it's starting to go, is he talking about us? Is he saying that we're the ones lost in the wilderness and that he's leaving us behind and that he's going to find them? Like that one person who doesn't deserve it? And they're kind of getting like, I think he's talking about us. And we talked about that 2 weeks ago. We talked about how God puts the you in rescue. God put us in the place of stepping out and rescuing people. And we talked about how God put the you in rescue. And we gave you one of these tracker things. Now, we didn't call them a tracker. We worked together because we weren't going to call them a tracker. We're going to call them key finders because we tested it out with some people, and we gave you this thing. It was like a little card that says, I found, and has a blank. Your section host has some extras. If you want more of them, you want 2 or 10 or 15 or 30 to go invite some people. We gave you a thing that said, I found blank, and you could say, hey, this is what I found at Journey Church, and you write it down in there, and then you invite them, and then you give them this key finder thing. They put it on their keys and say, hey, I found life at Journey. You can find your keys at least, and maybe next week come to Easter with me, so you give them to them. We found out real quick we shouldn't call them trackers because people were asking when we did it. They were like, so is this like tracking me? Like, this is a weird thing. And people were like wondering, if I go to a bar, is this going to like narc on me or something? So no, it's not that. It's a key finder. It's a thing. We want to give people something really valuable, but we'll give them a key finder until they come and we get to give them something valuable. We'll talk about that stuff later. Then last week, we talked about the parable of lost sheep, or the lost coin, which is the next one. He tells the lost sheep, he tells the Pharisees, like, look, we'll leave the 99 of you who think you don't need me. We'll go find the one. We'll leave them. And he's like, are you talking about me? And then he starts talking about coins. And he says, listen, what, this lady loses one of her coins, and she goes and searches, turns the house upside down, flips the joint upside down, looking for this coin, finds the one coin, and throws a huge party. And they're starting to get the idea. He's talking about us. He's talking about us like we're the ones who have value, and we're the ones that God pursues and loves and cares about. They're starting to get the idea, right? They're mounting tension because Jesus keeps telling these short stories and kind of getting these little jabs into them. And I love that part of it. There's a little bit of sarcasm in it, which is, let's face it, my love language. So anyways, he goes through this and he says, ultimately, we talked about this last week, that God puts the you in value, that God pursues us, he loves us, he cares about us, and he wants not only to save us from our sins, but to introduce us to a deep and personal and real relationship with him. And it's powerful stuff. It's really, really good. And we talked about it last week, and we talked about how if God put the you in value and he values you, then he also values little kids like Angeli. And Angeli is a little girl like 179 other kids that live in the community of Puerto Lopez, Ecuador. Now, that is not all that important except for the fact that we, Journey Church, planted a church in Puerto Lopez, Ecuador. Beautiful place, ridden with poverty, unbelievable. And last week, we introduced these, gave everybody an opportunity to sponsor a kid in the community where we planted a church. And 90 of you made the sacrifice and reached out and rescued 90 kids from the depths of unbelievable poverty. So that's huge. You guys should give yourself a hand for sure. Now listen, 90's not enough. So you're 90s, sorry, I love it. I'm thrilled. We're excited. That's great. Wonderful. Good, feel good about yourself, except for there are still a lot of kids. So we've got more packets. Your section host has a packet. Journey doesn't get anything from this except for the knowledge that we reached in and rescued kids from the hands of extreme poverty. We give them education, we give them love, we give them health care, we give them all the things that they need to be able to live, and it earns us an opportunity to share the gospel. And you get an opportunity to directly, through the ministry of compassion and all their networking, be able to communicate directly with your kid, the kid that you sponsor, and one day be able to visit them when we go to work in the church that we planted with the pastor that we've got there and the building that we built there and all the unbelievable stuff that's going on. So you should get one of those things from your kid, from your compassion. You're like, oh, I sponsored one. Sponsor 2. That's okay, right? Sponsor 3. Sponsor 32. I don't care. Just do whatever. Or you're like, oh, I would do it, but I don't have the money, right? Look at somebody around you and nod at them, and when they look at you and go, okay, that you're splitting it with them. They already know, don't worry about it. You just do it, fill it out, and just talk to them about it later and tell them I said it's okay, all right? So, like, good stuff. Make sure you see when your section host. You don't have to go to Journey Church to do that. So it's okay, just grab one, right on there, and take it. We can't have that leave the room. Your section host knows all the story. Here's the deal, though. So he talks to the lost parable of the lost sheep. Then he goes to the lost coin, these little kind of jabs, gentle things. And the Pharisees, I'm guessing, are somewhere in the back going, I think he's talking about us. And then Jesus turns the corner and brings in the left hook. Now, you know what the left hook is, right? Like if you follow boxing at all, you're kind of watching his lead hand. He's got his big right hand. He's watching the right hand. And then out of nowhere, you're not expecting it, this big left hook comes in and just takes him out. And that's generally what happens in boxing because you're not looking for the left hook. The left hook is the one that comes in and is the knockout upon a punch. And it just lands all of a sudden. And that's where Jesus comes out with this one. Now, the other two stories have been kind of a little bit smaller, right? You know, talk about a shepherd in 99 and go see the one, and they throw a party. And then it was about the coin, and they go turn the place upside down, and then when they find it, they throw a party. But then there's this longer story that we know as the prodigal son. Now, the word prodigal doesn't mean wasteful. It doesn't mean like partying. It doesn't mean crazy. What it means is lavish. And I want you to know something. I mean, you're kind of familiar with this story if you're not already. You saw the video. But this son looks at his dad and he says, I want what's mine. You know, I want to pretend you're dead, and I just want my part of the inheritance, and I want to go do my own thing. And his dad says, okay, fine. You know, it's got to hurt dad a lot. But he says, sure, you can have it. And he gives him his portion of the estate, and the son runs out and does his own thing. And if you believe the video, turned into like a dirty hipster, you know, and he runs out and he's partying and crazy in coffee houses and the whole deal. And then he comes back in. Come on, you get it. All right, so like he comes back in and he runs to dad, and dad forgives him and welcomes him back into the family. And then there's this tension that kind of rises up with the brother. The brother's like, no, that's not how this works, and gets mad, right? This is an unbelievable story. Now listen, we're not going to retell the whole thing, but there's this tension that arises when he gets to the end of his rope. Because you get this, like, it happened to all of us. Every last one of us who kind of did our thing, right? At some point in our life, maybe you grew up around church. This is a common story, right? Grew up around church. We go to back and forth Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. We do the thing. Then we turned 18. We slept in one Sunday. Next thing you know, we're like 35, got a couple of kids, and you're like, shoot, got to go back to church. I didn't mean to sleep in this long, you know, like it just meant that one weekend it turned into like 10 years, you know, and so you got a couple kids now and you're going back to church, and this is kind of the story, right? This is what happens. Eventually we all get to the end of our rope and we're like, man, I thought this would be a lot better than it was, you know, especially those of us who went through the party phase, right? We pushed back hard. And we did all the parties, and we took it all and ran it. We got to the end of it, and we're like, man, I thought this whole thing would be a lot more fun than it is. every time it's fun and then it gets not fun real quick, and we got to get to the end of it. Or maybe you went through the money thing, right? You're like, I'm going to be successful. I'm going to get some money. And then you get to the top of this mountain of stuff. And you're like, this isn't that fun. This isn't as rewarding as I thought it would be. Or maybe you're like, well, listen, I got other things to do. I'm just going to pursue family. And you poured into your family, and you're like, you know what? These ungrateful little kids. Oh, I'm just kidding. But like you get to this whole thing. Some of you are holding babies. I'm so sorry. But it'll be okay soon. But the thing is that you get this process where you get to the end of it, and you're like, this isn't what I thought. Same thing happens to this younger brother. He pushes away, gets his stuff, he goes off and he runs and does his thing. And the Bible says he blows it all on wasteful living, and he gets there to the end of it and he's like, man, this stinks. Because he gets to the end of it and he's like, I don't have anything left. Look at this passage in Luke chapter 15. It says, when he finally came to his senses, isn't that the fun part of parenting, when they finally come to their senses? Right now, they're coming to the end of their sentences. That's what I get a lot, but I don't get a lot of senses. Okay, but when they finally come to the end, to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have enough food to eat, to spare, but I'm living here, I'm dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I've sinned. I've both against heaven and against you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Please take me in as a hired servant. You ever rehearsed it? You ever done that? Like when you really got somebody to apologize to, or you want to have that talk with somebody, and don't act like you haven't done it, right? You rehearse it when they're not here, and you're like, man, this, and then I'm going to say this, and you got it all lined out, right? Don't act like you haven't done it, right? We've all done it. We've all given somebody else what for when they're thinking, that's what he's doing, but it's apology what for, right? So he's in the pigsty feeding the pigs and wanting to eat what they're eating, which is a big deal, right? And he's like shelling it out to the pigs and going, man, I just eat this scrap food. And he's just going over his apology. I'm just going to go to Dad and be like, Dad, I messed up. I sinned against heaven, against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. You ever felt not worthy? I mean, you ever gotten to that place in your life where you're like, man, I'm not worthy of this. I don't feel like, I want to love Jesus. I want to pursue Jesus, but I just don't feel like I'm worthy of being loved, I get it. I feel it every week. Every 7 days, I got to stand up on a platform like this one and talk to people, and I just look at it, I'm like, I don't get it. I'm not worthy. I'm not that guy. I got friends who are pastor people, and they're really good at what they do, and they're really not just good at speaking, but they're good at thinking, and they don't say stupid things, and they just feel unworthy. We all feel that way because it's a common attack that the enemy loves to sneak in on us. We all get to that place where we feel unworthy to be loved. So he gets to this place and he says, I'm not even worthy to be called your son. Just take me on as a hired hand. You know what's crazy for us is we know this story, but I just have this question for you and I as we're facing Easter. We're 7 days away, right? 7 days away from Easter. Will we be the church of the older brother or the loving father? When people finally decide that moment when they're tired of living life the way they've been living it, right? And they begin to think, and they're standing at the side of their crazy little pig trough, and they're feeding the pigs and just thinking, there's got to be something better than this. When they consider going back, right? When they consider finding their way back to God, what will they encounter when they encounter us? Are we going to be the church of the loving father or the older brother? Now, I know what we say. We always say we want to be the church of the loving father. We want to be that church that welcomes people and does all that stuff. But I want you to know there's more to it than just saying that, right? And there's more to it than you're probably going, well, we're the church of the loving father, right? Because you come to church at Journey and people are nice here and we smile at you no matter where you came from, right? And we're the church of the loving father because when you come in, we try to take all the I wish I could or I would if I could kind of things off. Like we always tell people, we take all the fear out of it because you don't have to worry. Like people are always saying to me, man, I'd come back to church, but if I came to church, the walls would fall in. Well, we made the walls out of light plastic. I mean, they're really fluffy. It's like a big blanket. It's not going to hurt you if they fall down. People are like, yeah, but I don't have anything dressy to wear. I'm like, look, our only dress code is please do, So, please wear clothes. That helps us a lot. We try to take that stuff out. People are like, I'd go to church, but the music sucks. Our music doesn't suck. Our music is great. I love it. So we try to take all that stuff out. That makes us the church of the loving father, right? Yeah, not quite. Not quite. I mean, being able to dress a certain way and having a building that doesn't look right and having cool music, it doesn't make us the church of the loving Father. It just makes us the church that's easier to, like church that doesn't suck, right? That's what, generally speaking, people go, that's the deal. But what makes us the church of the loving Father isn't what happened when we get in here. It's what happens while they're still out there. While people are still on the outside trying to consider, what are we doing to pursue them? Here's the thing. This story jumps around a little bit. It goes from this point where the son comes back and his dad accepts him and loves him and throws him a party, but then his brother reacts to it. So I just want to look at a few things that help us understand what we can do, what you and I can do in real time in our lives on Monday and Tuesday and Thursday, right? And Wednesday in our life that you and I can do to be the church of the loving Father, not the older brother. But first, we got to look at the older brother. So we're going to jump around the story a little bit. The tail end of this story, the brother has, kind of gets his panties in a wad and, doesn't like the fact that dad just threw a big party. And so I didn't know how else to say it. Then it says this in the end of this verse. Look at verse 30. Look at this. It says, the older brother was angry and he wouldn't go in. Don't you love it? His dad throws a party for the younger brother, right? And he's all off the side, being all, I can't believe it. Threw a party for him, he's all, he's just upset and just angry, just being a little, anyway, just being a pain, right? Like just really whiny. He says his father came and he begged him, but he replied, all these years, I love this self-righteousness, right? All these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing that you told me to do. Never once, really? That's an interesting phrase. But in all the time that you've never gave me, I love this, so much as a goat. Right? What are you even going to do with a goat? I don't even understand. So, but like, what are you going to do? So he says, you've never given me so much as a goat for a feast with my friends. And yet when I love this son of yours, do you ever have that conversation with your spouse? Like when your kids are doing something stupid and your spouse looks at you and goes, that's your kid. You ever do that? Like sometimes when my girls do something that's not so ladylike, my wife will look at me, and she doesn't even have to say it anymore. She's like, that's your kid. So now I beat her to it. I'm like, those are your daughters right there. That's your daughter that just belched enough to make me proud, right? Like, so that's awesome. So anyways, beside the point. But he goes, this son of yours shows back up, and now you're squandering, he's been squandering money on prostitutes. It's about to get real up in here. You celebrate by killing the fatted calf. I mean, you can see how angry he is. He's like red in the face, angry. Now the Pharisees really know what's about to be up, right? Because this is how they're feeling. Because he told the story in order, remember? He says, he gets his stuff, he goes away and squanders it and comes back, and the father runs to him and kisses him and puts the robe on his head and the sandals on his feet and throws a party. And the Pharisees are mad by this point in the story, and they're like, yeah, I'm not going to that party either. Man, they start to feel it, right? First there was the lost sheep, and then the lost coin, and now it's the lost son. And this whole thing's always been about the lost Pharisees. The self-righteous few figure they've got it together. But I want us to understand something. If we want to be the church of the loving Father, then you got to understand something. We're going to take criticism for it. That's the way it is. The church of the loving Father takes the criticism. It's just how it is, right? I mean, you've all heard it because you go to Journey Church, right? You're the church that lets those people go there, right? Those people go to Journey Church. Journey is the church for church. I've heard this one, church rejects. And I love that. It kind of makes me proud, right? Because I'm thinking, if you got rejected from church, you're doing something right, okay? So, but like the thing is that I love that part of it, that people do that, because the truth is that if you're going to be the church of the loving Father, you're going to take criticism from people. That's just how it goes. So here's the problem, though, is that we usually wait until people get all the way here to criticize us. And then we don't realize that we can be out there drawing the criticism. When people first came, we first started like dreaming up, what would we do about Journey Church? What would we name it? What would we do? What would we call it? You notice there's not a denomination on our sign, right? We don't just barely have a sign. I'm still working on it. But like we got the letters. They're in my garage, I promise. But But the thing is that, like, we didn't put a denomination on our name, right? We don't say Journey Christian Church. That's our story, right? I mean, that's our connection. That's our brotherhood. That's our friends. That's our tribe, our story. But we didn't put that on there because when we were talking together, we were dreaming about what would happen at Journey. I'm like, listen, you know what? I'll promise you, we don't need to offend people out there. We could just get them in here. We'll offend them fine. I promise, okay? So, like, let's not offend them when they're still out there. Let's go to them and do it, right? And so what the truth is that you and I, when we take this message to people and we love people where they're at, it's offensive to people who don't like that stuff, man. They get all balled up inside and going, I don't know, we shouldn't. I've been here doing the right thing, and now you're throwing a party for them. You're darn right we are. That matters. It matters to Jesus. Jesus tells us it matters to the kingdom. The whole host of heaven throws a party when just one person finds their way back out of the mess, when they're no longer standing at the side of the pig trough trying to decide if they should eat this or just die. We love people no matter where they are, and that's what makes you the church of the loving Father. Now, the story goes on, and this is my favorite part, let's face it. We're going to face some criticism, but let's get back to the party. Because remember what happens to make these guys mad is that the father throws this massive party. The son says, I don't want to do this anymore. He rehearses his whole thing. He puts on his walking shoes, which is nothing, and makes his way to the father. And I love this particular part of the story. Look at verse 20. So he returned home, right? He gets fed up with not being fed, and he says he returns home to his father. And this phrase, man, it gets me every time. And while he was still a long way off. Now, here's the thing. We have a tendency to think, man, when people come in, we want to make it welcoming. We want to have good coffee. We want to, make sure the place is presentable. We want to have comfortable places. We want to have cool music and not have to dress up and do all this stuff. And those are all unbelievably wonderful things. But understand what you and I found. When I filled in this thing for me, what I found was identity. What I found in Jesus, what I find in Journey is identity with the King. Like when I found that, the thing that is the problem is we can't wait until people get in here to offer it to them. The church of the loving Father is moved by compassion. We're moved by compassion, this part of us that doesn't just sit here and go, well, when they get here, we'll be glad to welcome them, and they can come in, and they can sit down, and they can hang out with us, and they can like the things we like, and they can bob their head to the music with us if they want, or they can do all these things, and we'll make it welcoming for them. That's not what this is about. That's a great thing, and I don't mean that bad at all, but the church of the loving Father, while they're still a long way off, runs after them because we love them in the way that Jesus loves us. When he offered you and me identity in him, he didn't wait until we got there. He saw us make the first gesture of picking our head up out of the trough of garbage that we've been eating out of and even consider it. And he ran to us, and with arms open wide, he kissed us, and he puts an identity in us that's unbelievable. That's the story. I mean, look back at that passage. In verse 20, it says that he ran to him and he wrapped his arms around him. He saw him and he come and he filled with love and compassion. He ran to his son and embraced him and kissed him. Think about what was happening, right? I mean, he's covered in filth. He didn't take a shower. He didn't have a place to bathe. He's covered in pig crap, right? He's covered in all of the mess of his sin. And the father runs to him and wraps his arms around him and kisses him. You know what? Most of the churches today are worried that if they talk and love sinners, that they're going to get some of their mess on them. You're afraid that if you have somebody over who lives a different way than you live, that their sin's going to rub off on you somehow. Like it's just like it's going to make you dirty. That's not what the Father's worried about. The church of the loving Father pursues him in his brokenness, loves him exactly where he is, but loves him enough not to leave him there. Let's look at the rest of the story because this is the powerful part of it. Like he loves him, embraces him, and kisses him. And the next verse is he says this right after that. He says, but this father said to the servants, quick, this is awesome stuff, right? Bring the finest robe and put in the house and put it on him. Like this is a big deal. Where does the finest robe come from? It's his robe. right? It's not like some leftover robe. It's not a robe that was reserved. It's certainly not coming out of his brother's closet, right? He's like, go get my best robe and bring it to him and put it on him. This is a big deal, right? He says this and he goes, go get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. What's he doing? He's giving him an entirely new identity. When we offer the love of Jesus to people, we don't offer it, come on in and see, this is good, right? It's the come on in, the water's fine kind of perspective. We go out and we get them and we tell them, this is unbelievable. Because when the Father gives the Son his identity, it changes everything. I want you to get something. What he's doing for him is telling him, nobody, when they see you, won't think of your filth. They're not going to think of your story. They're not going to think of your yesterday. They're not going to think of your addiction. They're not going to think of what you're lost in. They're going to look at you and see me. And more importantly, when the Father looks at the Son, he sees the Father. That's what's valuable about Jesus' love for us. That's what makes Easter a party worth having, right? Is it matters because he throws this thing on and he says, listen, when God looks at us, he no longer sees our biggest mistake. He no longer sees our brokenness, our story. He no longer sees all the things that you regret. When God looks at you, because if you're in Christ, you're a new creation. When God looks at you, he sees his Son. He doesn't see his mess. He sees his Messiah. Now that's huge. That's huge for us if we choose to live in that. That's a powerful story. But we've got to be the church of the loving Father, shares the Father's identity. I mean, we go out and share this with people. We give it away freely. People think this is crazy, don't they? I mean, people always ask sometimes, like they'll go, but wait a second, why do we put so much time, why do we put so much effort in buying all these key finders? Why do we care about this stuff? Why do we put so much effort in Easter? Easter's a big deal around here if you haven't noticed this already, right? I mean, it's a huge deal for us. We put a lot of work. Our staff has been working for months leading up to Easter. We push it all to the middle, to use a gambling analogy, I guess. But we push it all to the middle based for Easter. We care about Easter. We love it. People are like, well, why do you do that? You know, why do you keep investing money and working so hard for Easter? Those people only come twice a year. Because they come twice a year, for crying out loud. I mean, it's a big deal, right? This is huge. It matters. If we want to be the church of the loving Father, we have to care about the fact that they only come twice a year. Go get them and bring them in and throw a party. That's the gospel. That's what the story is all about. It matters. We are the church that shares the identity of the Father. That matters. The identity of the Father is one that goes to the brokenness, not waits for the brokenness to show up. When he was still a long way off, he rushed to him and wrapped his arms around him and kissed him. And he wasn't afraid of getting his mess on him. He was wanting to offer redemption. This matters. I'm getting fired up. I got to move on. Okay, so, this is the best part of the whole deal. Man, what happens next is the powerful story. I mean, he wraps him, loves him, puts a robe on his finger, a robe on his back, and ring on his finger, and sandals on his feet. And then he says, "Look, kill the fatted calf." They're having steak. I love steak. Okay, listen, I really, really, really love steak. I love all beef except meatloaf. Okay, meatloaf is disgusting. It's a huge tragedy. Meat comes out in a loaf. It should not go in a loaf. I'm just saying. But apart from that, the rest of it, they probably had burgers with that part of it. But like they had a huge, like, can you imagine how extravagant this party had to be? This isn't like, hey, guys, like, run down to the Party Central and get some paper hats, and you go over and get some paper plates and get some plastic forks so we don't have to do dishes. And like, you do this, and you kind of go mow that part of the lawn and put some lights up, and you do this. He didn't do like that. He's like, you, go slaughter an entire animal. Do you know how much work it takes? I mean, this is 1,200 pounds, right? I mean, they took that joker and they've been fattening it up. You know what? I mean, some of you are from the farming world. You get it, right? Like, we're finishing this joker, right? We're making it perfect. We got this thing ready. It's a calf. It's small. This is good, right? This is going to be good eating. And they lead that thing into the slaughter. They kill this lamb, this giant cow, and they butcher that joker up and make steaks. That's phenomenal. This is a party. They're not kind of halfway going. This is a big deal. We, next week, have an opportunity to throw a massive party because the Church of the Loving Father throws a party. We throw a party, and we are thrilled when people come in. This is why I want every single one of you, if you took one of these 2 weeks ago, that's okay, take 3 more. Okay? If you want 5 more, and you know some people at work, and you're like, I don't know, I'm a little nervous. I don't know if I can talk about my faith at work. You can talk about your faith at work, because all you're doing is telling what you found, right? I mean, if you found $50 in the parking lot, you'd be telling them about it, right? So, like, you tell them, listen, I found this. I found identity. I found hope. I found this, right? You just tell them, I found whatever. You fill in the blank. There's a marker in the thing. And you take one of these things and look, listen, I found this. You can find your keys. And if you come with me next week, you can find something even more valuable. It's unbelievable. I was just talking with somebody before church today, before this service. They were at the first service, and they were just blown away. They were like, I stopped going to church 10 years ago, just because of all the things you talked about today. And this friend invited me, and I didn't want to be the guy who comes on Easter, so I came the week before Easter, right? So felt a little better about it. So and I was like, man, that's what we started this church for. And it was unbelievable. Then last service, this is gonna blow your mind, and then we're gonna wrap this up because I gotta land the plane somewhere. So here's the deal. It says this. This lady Allison, who got baptized in the first service, right? She says this. She says, I want to be baptized. She says, I've been an agnostic/atheist for over 20 years. And before that, I was raised in a Catholic church, so I've never really had a relationship with Jesus. While I've taken steps in attempt to pursue Christ and believe, these things did not start clicking for me until a couple of weeks ago. I absolutely know now that God has put me exactly where I needed to be a year and a half ago. I stumbled across Journey because of the Halloween event, and after looking at your website, it seemed like a family-friendly church. I've been in Jackson for over 3 years, but not found a church home because I always stayed just long enough to start feeling hypocritical about being there without believing the things professed by the church. I carried my non-belief internally and had much shame about it. Listen to this. However, I remember during my first service at Journey, one of the pastors mentioned that it would be okay for me just to pass the communion tray if I were not quite there yet. And that Journey was created for people to belong long before they believed. I'm like, wow, this is blowing my mind. Then this church was actually the first church where I felt like I could be my authentic self and not have to fake who I was, what I believe in. I could be honest with myself and with others about my journey and pass the tray as long as I needed to. This powerful story, it goes on, and she says, I had an absolute God moment a few weeks ago. I truly felt like the Holy Spirit came down and showed me some very concrete signs during one of my weakest moments. Now that my eyes have been opened, sign after sign have been displayed right before my eyes. I would love to share my story with you sometime soon. Anyways, since then, I felt Jesus living inside of me, and I can't get enough of the Bible now. Whereas I've only opened it on rare occasion previously during a Bible study or a seminar. Now I crave a deeper and stronger relationship with Christ. Why? Because that's it. That's it right there. That matters. You should have been here for first service when she came up. It was awesome. But here's the deal. Like, it matters. Why? Because we're the church of the loving Father. We didn't wait till she got here. We had a Halloween event. We got criticism about it. Halloween for churches, you can't do that stuff. That's the devil's holiday. Whatever. The devil has these people. I would rather get them from him if that's okay with you. Right? We love these people, and we care about them, and we want to do whatever it takes. And it's risky. It's terribly difficult, right? I mean, it's terribly awkward, right? To grab something and go, hey, how would you think about coming to Easter with me next week? You know, that's awkward to do. It's difficult. Makes you feel awkward. It puts you on the spot. You kind of feel like you're not worthy because, like, that guy saw me do this, or this person knows I cuss a lot, or, you know, like all this stuff. And you're kind of like, maybe I'll just go ask my neighbor. Oh, no, my neighbor, not my neighbor. Maybe somebody else, you know. And you're just thinking, but you know what the thing is? Jesus went through all of that for us. He is the loving Father who pursued us. And while we were still a long way off, he ran to us and wrapped his arms around us and kissed us and put a ring on our finger and sandals on our feet and a robe on our back. He changed our identity. You and I have an opportunity, not just to be a part of this and to observe it for ourselves and hear our own story played out over and over again. We have an opportunity to be the church of the loving Father, not the older brother. It's not our music, it's not our environment, it's not our style of dress. What makes us the church of the loving Father is that we run to people instead of waiting for them to come to us. It's because of the resurrecting. It's because of this story. It's the song that we learned last week. Powerful song. Unbelievable about the resurrected Jesus is resurrecting me. And he's using you and me to resurrect our community. You and I are the hope of the world through Jesus Christ. That's powerful stuff. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to stand up in a second and we're going to sing this song. We learned it last week. It's powerful stuff. And then when we sit down, the ushers are going to come up and they're going to bring you a tray, and it'll have a little piece of bread and a little cup of juice. Now here's one of a few options. If you're a follower of Jesus, you just take one of each. Reflect, think, center your heart on the cross and the love of Jesus that's resurrecting you. You just take one of each when you feel led to. But here's the thing, if you're here today and that's not your story, you already know this. We're thrilled if you just hand that to the person next to you, because we're here to help you take your next step toward Jesus. Nobody here is pushing on you. Nobody wants you to fake it. It's okay with us if you belong here long before you believe the way we believe. But maybe you're here today and you're going, man, I've been on the bubble. I've passed it a few times, whatever. Maybe today's the day you go, you know what, I want to make a choice to follow Jesus. Maybe today's that day where you're going, listen, I don't want to make a decision and then leave this whole thing. I want to begin a real and personal relationship with Jesus. And maybe this is the first way you do it. Maybe start by just taking communion. A little piece of bread that represents the body of Jesus broken for you, and a little cup of juice that just represents the blood of Jesus poured out to cover your sin. It's the loving Father's way of running to you and putting a robe on your back and a ring on your finger and sandals on your feet. Maybe that's your story. But either way, let's sing, the resurrecting Jesus is resurrecting me.